Hello and welcome to the program. I am DEJI360. With just days to the deadline of the signing of the Electoral Act Amendment Bill, President Muhammadu Buhari has finally signed the highly anticipated legislation into law. So Nigeria has now got an Electoral Act now that will guide the election for 2023. President Buhari had initially rejected the bill after the National Assembly made direct primary compulsory for political parties in the country, saying the provision violates the spirit of democracy. It was on that basis that the Senate and House of Representatives reworked the bill to provide for indirect, direct, and direct primaries, as well as consensus. That's the consensus options now. Consensus option, I should say, for selecting candidates that will represent political parties in elections. Now, with the new bill signed into law, parties are now at liberty to use any of the three options to elect their candidates for any election that will be organized by the Independent National Electoral Commission. Now, electronic transmission of election results will also be used for electoral processes in the country. Remember, that had been a big issue of controversy, but all of that is now resolved. However, while signing the bill, President Buhari asked the National Assembly to expunge Section 81, Subsection 12 of the Electoral Act, which states that, quote, no political appointee at any level shall be a voting delegate or be voted for at the convention or congress of any political party for the purpose of the nomination of candidates for any election, end of quote. President Buhari said the provision is in conflict with the country's constitution, which already protects the right of serving political officers to vote in their party's function. Joining me now to discuss this further is public affairs analyst Adewale Ajadi. Sir Ajadi, thank you very much for joining us on the program. The president eventually signed the electoral bill into law. Of course, he did raise concern, asking the National Assembly to expunge that section, Section 84, Subsection 12. I guess the president decided to sign it and not to withhold his assent on the basis of that section now, Section 84, Subsection 12, because he probably doesn't want to give the impression that he's not in support of the country now having a new electoral act before the next election.
More than that, thank you very much for inviting me. More than that, he wants to make sure that it doesn't create a logistical problem in the future for INEC and others to conduct an election. Anything he does now will be looked under the prism that he's got some hidden agenda. So it is better to sign the bill as it's done and quite rightly done and raise his concerns. And his concerns around the section you talked about is about preventing people from exercising fully what rights the Constitution has already given them. And I think that's a logical and rational position for any real Democrat to hold.
And you think the National Assembly will do what the president has said, expunge that section?
I don't know exactly what the National Assembly is going to do. You know, you have all the members have different perspectives. It's not predictable. But I think it is incumbent when you have a principle that you want to stand on, to fight for those principles. Principles are not a guarantee of victory, but they are certainly a guarantee of your own position. And make sure his position is clear. And it's a very credible position for him to hold, to say, I'm not going to hold the country to a state, but this issue ought to be resolved. And think about it. If we do what we are going to do as the presently stands, we are going to negate the participation of certain people because they are appointed to serve their country. And political appointees might have a bad name, but we don't know what people's intentions are when they become political appointees.
That's true.
And so we are negating their ambitions and we are just stereotyping them as people who have other than worthy intentions. That's not right. And I don't think that should be done in this manner. So when we have a procedure that sacrifices substance on the altar of form, as this does, then it is wrong to let it stand.
And it's quite unfortunate in this country, the moment one takes up a political appointment, that individual is sort of seen as a very bad person. You know, I don't know why it's always a problem when you take up a political appointment. you sort of lose public trust completely.
Well, there's a trust deficit in Nigeria, and some of it is legitimate, let's be honest. We have had people monetize and corral the Commonwealth for their own purposes when they have political appointments. And we know for a fact, with little power, people have abused it generally. But actually, we cannot make a rule based on the worst of us. We should make a rule in aspiration of the best in us. And we cannot punish everybody by prejudice alone. To regain trust, to rebuild trust, we have to create a climate whereby we are able to punish people who do things that we don't like, but we are also able to respect people who do the things that we respect. And we cannot have a country where we encourage cynicism and we encourage suspicion of people until it's proven that they've done something wrong, which is what you are talking about, which is the general feeling in the land. The real problem that we face in this country is this distrust, because it's costly to us. It's very, very costly to us, where everybody says a pox on all their houses and they're all going to do whatever they want when they become political appointees, and I'm going to do that as well. That very, very negative position is indicting of the future of the country, and we must make everything sure that this does not continue to happen.
Now, let's talk about the Electoral Act itself. Now, at least, no one can say we haven't got a law to guide us. We have at least a new set of laws now with this amendment to guide the conduct of next year's election. Now, going forward now, what do you expect to see? Because even in previous elections that we've had in this country, you look at the electoral laws, that guided those elections. It's not as if they were completely barred as such, but the problem is getting people to do the right thing, getting people to comply with the provisions of the law. So going forward, what do you expect to see?
I don't expect anything fundamentally different. This law allows us to use certain procedures and tools at our disposal. But we're still talking about the same hardware, which is human beings. And we're still talking about human beings trying to get, let me even edit that. We have a toxic political culture where the winner takes it all and doesn't care so long as they win. There's going to be every attempt to circumvent, to undermine, to get around, to get what they want. So the real focus has to be the enforcement of those things, the checks and balances, and making sure. Well, unfortunately, when we start talking about legislation and stuff like that, it's reduced to either or. It's reduced to silver bullets. If we get this legislation, everything will be fixed. That's not true. That's never true. It's still human beings
because that is the impression that has been created all this while. A lot of people think, look, with the passage of the electoral bill, that Nigeria's problems, as far as election goes, that our problems are solved. But and as you just said, we refuse to understand the fact that, look, yes, you are changing the law, yes, you're trying to make the law better, but then it's the same human beings who will be taking part in the process.
Well, all over the world, politics is about evolution. It's not about perfection. There's no human system that's perfect. We've just seen what happened in the United States. We easily forget that they use themselves as the gold standard of election processes. And that's still not resolved. A year or so after the election has finished and there's a president, and this is not the first time they've had a crisis in the election process, but this has been the most egregious, with citizens storming the Capitol. So you've got this kind of notion that somehow we are going to jump all of those processes, those evolutionary processes, and get it perfectly right. That's not true. There is no election process that is not capable of being undermined. In fact, it doesn't even have to be factually undermined. In the country where we use gossip excessively, it's only going to need for people to put abroad that the election was a failure for it to be undermined. So, I don't know that any system that we put will be perfect. But what we need to do is start building trust and transparency and making sure that even you yourselves as the media give the benefit of doubt until proof to the otherwise establishes that someone has infringed against the processes of the election.
But do you generally expect that this new law now would engender better elections than we've had in this country?
We can hope so. I mean, electronic transmission, for example, can be helpful. It can make for faster and quicker transmission, but also it is also vulnerable. There is no system that is invulnerable. And it's easy. We have seen other parts of the world where elements have been hacked, and it's also possible for someone to misrepresent the facts before the electronic vote is properly been established. So there's so many things that can be undermined. So I would love to say we're going to get perfection, but I think that we have to see this as an improvement and make sure it works better for us.
And of course, I wouldn't be surprised if after the next election, one of the issues that will be taken to court will be over the issue of the transmission of results now electronically, that at some point that it just failed in some cases. It won't be a surprise.
Certainly. As a lawyer, I'm fairly sure that it's an arguable point. It's a point, but it's going to depend on facts. There's so many ways in which you want to establish your client's position. So I don't think that would be improbable. In fact,
just before I let you go, when do you think, at what point do you think we'll get to when this country will become ripe for electronic voting? Because we shouldn't confuse this. Some people are confusing this issue of electronic transmission of results. They're confusing it with voting electronically. This is certainly not electronic voting. So when do you think we're going to get to that point?
Well, there are certain things that I think, and this is my personal view, that are going to be critical to get to that point. And they are fundamentals of trust. One, that people understand that democracy is evolutionary, not revolutionary. So that means that you get a better election, you don't get a perfect election. And because there is a flaw in an election doesn't make it completely obsolete. Two, that we trust the fact that the checks and balances in the system is more likely to get it right than get it wrong. Three, that we stop this toxic political process where it is when somebody wins, they are almost the enemy till the time they stop running elections. So it's winner takes it all. Four, probably critically, we stop weaponizing things like religion and things like ethnicity for electoral purposes, and we recognize that we're all Nigerians. And because one side has some ideas and they're in power, does not mean that we can't improve on it. You know, this is finally the point. If we engage in zero defect kinds of understanding of government, where we think a government is either going to be perfect or a failure, then we're not going to have an effective political process. But if we recognize that even if APC does well, PDP can do better by proposing better policies and better practices, not necessarily rubbishing them or saying we have a better and a more improved service, then we are going to be a lot better for it, and then we can vote in any manner, including electronically, and we won't be so bothered.
And truth is that we've seen the electronic voting system now deployed in Kaduna State on two elections, to be candid, local government elections. I think on two occasions now, that state government has deployed electronic voting, so to speak. So, and you begin to wonder, if a state could do it, then why can't the entire country do it?
Well, the challenge is really trust. It's really trust. And then you also have to bear in mind that the governor of Kaduna State is not swayed by negative voices and negative challenges. You almost need to be a little bit dictatorial to push reform in Nigeria. And if you leave things to non-dictatorial processes, it takes longer. And I prefer the latter, actually. I prefer the latter because then it's more sustainable.
And I think you're quite right. I can just imagine how difficult it would be for a president to just push through electronic voting in the National Assembly. It's easier for a governor to do that because in the state, most times the governors have the state legislature in their pocket, so to speak. So probably easier to push things through there than to push it at the national level. But all the same, thank you very much for your time, Mr. Adewale Ajadi, and thank you for your contributions.
Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you so very much. All right, we'll take a short break now and we'll be right back. Stay with us.
Opinions are free, facts are sacred, but truth is universal.
How, in practical terms, can we, for instance, de-escalate the tension?
President must see himself as the President of the Federal Republic.
We know where the enemy is. 3 places. The Lake Chad Basin, the border area between Nigeria and Cameroon, and then the Sambisa Forest.
On DEJI360, we give you a complete dose of everything. Opinion, facts, and undiluted truth.
I hardly believe what politicians say in this part of the world.
A new Nigeria is possible, a future is possible.
We delve into the issues, dissect it so that you can understand it, use it to take action.
I don't think there's any need for any governor to look for grant for ranching.
DEJI360, dissecting the issues.